I've been really craving a nice cozy game to play recently. Something to calm me down at the end of the night and allow me to just enter a state of total contentment, at one with the world and at the whim of the cosmos. So obviously, there was no better time to play Doom. I was gonna say Doom Eternal. It's not Doom Eternal, it's Doom the Dark Ages. What am I doing? So obviously, there was no better time to play Doom the Dark Ages. A game that makes some minor changes to the Doom formula that we've experienced in the last two entries, but it still manages to deliver that exhilarating experience that we all know and love. Look, I won't spend too long on the game's story. Like Doom Eternal before it, there is a greater emphasis on the story and the lore of the game compared to the other entries in the franchise, but it is still far from the strongest point the game has to offer. The forces of hell are attacking the Night Sentinels, the Maker have the Doomslayer, and they use him like he's an ODST from Halo, dropping him into engagements whenever the Night Sentinels ask for help. You know what the go is with the Doomslayer. He kills demons and he takes no names. His language is destruction, and if you don't understand that, then that's a you problem. Gameplay wise, Doom the Dark Ages sees some minor departures from the prior two games, opting to slow things down a tad and focus a little more on the bullet hell like nature of the original game, dodging and weaving between enemy projectiles and adding a shield on top of that. Now you might think that having a shield means that you play incredibly defensively, but this is not the case. In a weird way, it's kind of like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. There is a large focus on parrying and using your defensive abilities in an offensive manner. Trying to sit behind your shield will only lead to your stance being broken and being completely defenseless against parryable attacks. As someone who adores parry systems and loves Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, I really enjoyed this shift in gameplay. It also just helps distinguish this title from the other two entries, allowing the IP to proliferate rather than going down into the trenches of formulaic slop. The roster of weapons is pretty cool too. Slightly smaller than that of Doom Eternal, but it still has enough to feel like you have a variety of options. Each weapon has two classes, which majorly changes how they behave rather than only how their alternate fire works, which is how it was handled in Doom Eternal. A personal favourite of mine is the shotgun that you start the game with. Yeah, it's basic, but it's punchy, it sounds great, and it even has an upgrade which sets enemies on fire and results in them dropping lots of little pieces of armor for you to pick up. Now for the part that everyone was expecting, the soundtrack. I'm just going to rip the band-aid right off. The soundtrack just does not hit the same as it did in the previous two games. The success of Doom's future in terms of its soundtracks has always been in question ever since it was brought to light how toxic and abusive key individuals at id Software were towards Mick Gordon. I recommend reading it if you haven't already, and I'll include a link to Mick Gordon's explanation of the situation, but here's the crux of it. Marty Stratton was unreasonable to work with and gave Mick Gordon ridiculous deadlines that involved absurd amounts of crunch. Mick Gordon's contracts and pay entitlements were up in the air for virtually the majority of his time working on the soundtrack, and at the end of the day, credit for the soundtrack was stolen from Mick Gordon by Chad Mossholder, who ended up editing together the notoriously bad official soundtrack for Doom Eternal. In his stead, Finishing Move has come in to do the soundtrack for Doom the Dark Ages, a team that has other video game soundtracks like Borderlands 3 and Halo Wars 2. To their credit, they were given an impossible task, as Mick Gordon's iconic style was synonymous with modern Doom, and replacing it was just never going to work. Unfortunately, it means that most of Doom the Dark Ages soundtrack comes off as quite shallow and generic, featuring various stock standard tropes of metal, including triplet chugs, blast beats, and extremely basic chord phrasings, with none of the character and impact that the soundtracks before it had. To be fair, there were times when it felt like they truly understood the assignment, but honestly, most of the time it felt like I was playing a Doom mod with how basic the music was. Finishing Move did a technically fine job, fantastic at some points, but when you've had champagne, it kinda sucks to go back to drinking beer. What is nice is the fact that the game runs incredibly well, which honestly surprised me because it has forced ray tracing for PC, and while my PC is no slouch, I seldom see games run well when ray tracing is on. The environments are gorgeous, enemy models are richly detailed, and the use of ray tracing here does allow for the lighting to be a little more nuanced and subtle when it needs to be. Whether now is the right time to force ray tracing is a discussion for another time, but it's hard to deny how good this game looks with it. The game isn't bug free, and expecting it to be so would be unfair. I had a few progression halting bugs where I could no longer interact with anything, which required a restart from the last checkpoint. There was also this bizarre issue I had where I walked through an endless hallway and then fell through the level, only for my ears to be assaulted as the game tried to walk me back into the level repeatedly. Either way, these issues were about 5 minutes of my 20 hours or so with the game. Fairly insignificant if you ask me, but it is worth noting that there are some bugs here. Whether Doom the Dark Ages is the right Doom game for you is a question only you can answer. It offers a unique spin on the Doom formula that we've grown to love over the years. This spin adds positive friction to the game and creates a great experience for its 15 to 20 hour runtime. There is a noticeably large hole where Mick Gordon's soundtrack once was, and what was put in its place ultimately struggles to fill that void. But beyond that, it's a pretty damn good time.